So today I'm doing a little bit more maintenance on the wagon. I've noticed a burning smell recently, and what it turned out to be is the CV boot, the inner CV boot, and you can see it's starting to fail. I didn't notice that it was ripped at all, but it is starting to leak out of the bottom. And since it's leaking, it's just starting to fling grease all over the place. The majority of it is ending up on the downpipe, which just smells amazing. And you can see there, a bunch of the grease is splattered all over the subframe. So I'll definitely have to spend a little bit of time cleaning it up down there. But it shouldn't be too bad. You can see the grease there coming out of the boot. And this is the inner CV boot. The outer one seems to be okay. So I'm just going to go ahead and just replace the inner boot. As you can tell, there's just grease all along the downpipe that just smells awesome. So today I'm going to go ahead and replace just the boot itself. First thing you want to do is remove the wheel. Next, you'll want to grab a punch, and where it's indented right here, you want to hammer this out before you pull this bolt off. And once you've hammered this back out, next thing you'll want to do is put the wheel back on. Now lower the car back onto the ground. So the next thing you want to do, grab your 32mm and get it on something like this with a longer handle. And I just use the end of my jack and just slid it together like this. And I've already broken the bolt. It actually wasn't too bad. So now I'm going to lift the car back up. So the first thing we're going to need to do is disconnect the lines from the strut and undo these bolts here. So I'm going to start with the brake line, and that's a 12mm. Next I'm going to remove this other bracket, and that's also 12mm. So the next thing we'll need to remove are the two 19mm here, and I've already started by soaking them with a little bit of PB Blaster. Now the bottom is just a standard bolt, so you can remove that. But before you touch this top one, you want to make sure to make a little mark before you pull it off, because this is a camber bolt, and unless you want to pay to have an alignment done after you put this all back together, it'd be a good idea to mark this here. So when you put everything back together, you put it exactly the way it was, and you won't have any issues with your alignment. So I'm going to mark the bolt and remove it. Now for the lower bolt. I don't know if you'll be able to tell a difference in the camera, but this is the camber bolt here, and as you can see, it's quite a bit thicker right there. And this is the lower bolt. So I'm just going to set these aside and continue on. Next, we'll want to remove this nut. So as you'll notice, I've cut away the boot because there is a trick you can do to replace the inner CV boot. You can pull out this retaining ring here, and you can disconnect it and pull it out just enough to remove the boot and clean it all up and get it back in there. I cut the boot out because I was going to do that, but after kind of thinking about it and just how nasty everything looks, I just decided to go ahead and just remove the entire axle so I can really clean it up and repack it with grease before reinstalling it. So if you want to do that, that is one option. But so since I'm going to replace the entire, I'm going to pull the entire axle out. You want to, I just bought a cheap set of punches. If you rotate the axle by hand, you'll see that there's a roll pin in here. And on the side that has like this little indentation, you'll want to just use a hammer. This will kind of give you a better idea of what it looks like. It's just right there in the center. So you'll want to just carefully hammer that out, and if you use the right size punch, it should come out fairly easy, and you should be able to reuse it. Well, if you can see it here, it's got kind of that zigzag pattern. So this one came out pretty easy, so I'm going to go ahead and reuse it. I'd rather stick with the OEM stuff anyway. Here's a better shot of the roll pin set that I was talking about. Just your average set of roll pins seem to work pretty good. This one in particular fit perfectly. I'll make sure to leave a link in the description. So the next thing you want to do is disconnect the strut from the assembly down here. With any luck, I'm going to carefully remove the axle. You also want to be really careful of the brake and the ABS lines to not damage those as well. There we go, she's out. So now that I have it out of the car, first thing I need to do is separate the ends, and you want to pull this little, you want to pop this little ring out, the little retaining ring. This is what I was talking about, that if you were to, you could pop this out while the axle was still in the car, and then you can separate the end like this and then slide the CV boot back in there. But like I mentioned, I'm going to thoroughly clean this up, so figured it'd just be easier to pull it out. And as you can see, this is a super messy job, so definitely have lots of towels and cardboard to set everything down. And I don't know if it matters, but these rollers here, they come off pretty easy, but I'm going to do my best to try to set them aside and put them back on the same ends when I reassemble everything. So the next thing you'll need to do is, with a pair of snap ring pliers, you want to pull this snap ring off, and this will allow you to remove this assembly, and then we can reinstall the boot. went ahead and got the Subaru, the OEM boot. There are some cheaper ones out there that will actually come with their own grease, and I think they're about half the cost as the Subaru boot, but this was only about 20 bucks. And I'm going to use my own grease when I reinstall this, but I'll make sure to leave a link in the description for the OEM boot and one of the other aftermarket ones. Now it's time to reinstall the boot. And you'll see that the boot ends right about at this little indentation right here. So we'll just slide it on. I still have the original fastener, so go ahead and slide that on the boot after we give it a good wipe down. The boot and the fastener have been reinstalled, so now I'm just going to go ahead and reassemble the rest of it. So instead of using the Subaru grease, I'm just going to replace it with the Redline stuff. They make a lot of really good products, and so I'm pretty confident that running this is probably going to be a lot better than what was in there. And I'm planning on replacing the other one, and also put a link in the description for this as well. Let's go ahead and reattach the snap ring. Next, we want to fill this with the grease. We'll place this retaining ring back on. Okay, the ring is back on. You just want to give it a little tug, make sure it doesn't come off. I just have to reinstall this ring. There we go. The new boot is installed. The fasteners are on. It's filled with grease. Now we just have to get it back in the car. Okay, so I just took the time to go ahead and just wipe everything down, clean it up the best I can. There's quite a bit on the downpipe. So I cleaned that the best I could, and it seems pretty clean for the most part. The rest of it should burn off after I drive around for a little bit, but this should eliminate any of the burning grease smell. All I need to do is grease the ends a little bit and get this reinstalled in the car. Now the axle's back in the car. It was kind of a pain to get it back in there. At the same time, while trying to be careful to not get it dirty. If you just take your time, it installs pretty easily. Now if you want to make it a lot easier, one thing you can do is undo this bolt right here on the lower control arm, and that'll allow you to lower it just enough to give you that extra clearance to get that axle back in there. But it is possible to reinstall it without removing that. So the next thing I'm going to do is reinstall everything, reinstall the brake lines, get the suspension hooked back up, and torque everything down. Alright, everything's back together, everything's torqued down. I believe these were about 125, 126 pounds a piece, and the axle nut is 137. I'll definitely double check these before I post the video, but the only thing I have left to do is lower the car, torque the axle nut, and it should be done. Alright, so actually the last thing I'll need to do is jack the car back up, pull the wheel off, and just strike the edge of this nut one more time to get that little indentation right there. And that'll be it.